According to the CDC, the suicide rate amongst working age population has increased 33% during the last 2 decades, 18 per 100,000 people. By industry, the two highest rates are mining at 72 per 100,000 and construction at 56 per 100,000. Peckham Industries are in both segments. In this episode of the Peckham Pulse, we recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, dedicated to raising awareness, reducing stigma, and promoting mental wellness for all. Today, we are joined by our own Justin Berry, Foreman of Hoosick Quarry, and Heather Guare-Miller, Human Resources Manager.
Thanks, guys. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we're going to get into a little bit of a tough topic, right? We're at our passion for safety. We're typically talking about the physical side of safety at Peckham Industries. Today, I think we're going to change gears, talk a little bit about the mental side, which is something I would say was brought around a little bit during the pandemic. But I think fortunately for us as a company, we've kept it at the forefront, trying to take the stigma away from having conversations about these things. So with that said, Justin, do you want to just kind of share some of your thoughts? You know, unfortunately, you've had some experiences with it, and I think, you know, who better than you to talk to our folks about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a mental health crisis in the entire country right now. It's not just our industries, unfortunately. And my personal experiences with my father's suicide when I was 15, and when I was 27, nearly myself. So it's something that never really goes away. Unfortunately, having a history in your family as well also does kind of affect you without really knowing it.
Heather, talk a little bit about your experience. I think you maybe bring a little different perspective to things, kind of just as one of our human resources managers.
I've been through a lot of personal trauma myself, dealing with the death of my husband and having had been there, and having to do CPR and be, first response at the time. I've had family members and health crises that have come up, but having been with the company now 25 years, and interactions with all of our employees in the position that I'm in, and having seen a lot of change over the years and how that impacts our members, certainly.
What do you guys attribute to, why such high rates in our industry? What do you think, what's driving that?
Stress. I think, you're working long hours. Maybe the environment that you're working in. We are a very safety conscious company, but we are in an environment that creates stress and creates anxiety. On top of that, I think the economy and there are many other factors involved.
Yeah, just to bounce off your thought, Heather, about what we do, sometimes we forget about the isolation part of it. We have these sprawling properties, right? We have a haul truck driver that's in a truck all day, a loader operator, excavator, or a one ground guy that's supposed to do all the kind of stuff that's going on, and they're by themselves a majority of the day. So you talk about those life experiences, those life struggles, or maybe it's even deeper than that, and they don't really have a lot of opportunities to talk about them to other people, except for maybe on break, or maybe if they're brave enough, which is why I think, our industry is kind of having that tough time with the numbers, is that tough person mentality of what we do and getting that into day to day. So I think that isolation is a huge part of that, and it's why we see a lot of folks struggle in our industry.
Definitely agree.
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a big part, James. Maybe not even so much the isolation, because most of our sites, there's enough people with a team atmosphere. But I think to Heather's point, just about the stress, let's face it, longer hours. This isn't a 9-to-5 job, and then just as you also said, the real world problems out there, just the external stressors on people. Obviously, a little bit of a dark topic, but I love the fact as a company we talk about it, and we again try to normalize it to the point where we can have a conversation about it. And I know we've got our senior leadership team support, and again we've really tried to work closely with AGC and some of our other industry partners to help get the resources to educate people.
We definitely have them here. I've worked for a number of different companies, high stress in a different aspect, and there's much more support here than any other place that I've been at. Yeah. I've only been here for about 5 years now, so
it's good to hear.
Yeah, and to expand on that, Steve mentioned it at the beginning. You guys both have volunteered your time in putting on either trainings or just having an open discussion, an open forum about this topic itself. So what made you, feel like, okay, you know what, I do want to incorporate this into this training?
I did it to help others. I was very fortunate when I went through a very tragic event in my life that I had a great support team. I had a large family and friends and coworkers that showed up for me. And in that process, it helped me realize that as you can be as strong as you think you are, but when you're dealing with internal struggles like that and not really knowing how to get past it and how to heal, you need to find sometimes outlets that. So I wanted to tell my story. If I can help even one person to find some of the options that I had and some of the, the processes that I went through to heal from my event. That's why I do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Very similar on my end. I mean, I certainly didn't help my tragic event by my initial career of working in emergency medical services because I just continued to witness terrible things all the time. Right. Not every day was terrible, but there was enough of it. But I also had the same mindset was if I could just help one person.
Justin, I guess just, again, as a foreman at Hoosick, what are the conversations like with your folks, your team, as far as providing help or just, again, trying to destigmatize the issue?
Most of the time we're actually, I don't want to call it a sounding board for each other, but that's really what we are. We're able to have those free and open conversations. I understand my coworkers. He understands what I'm going through. And I mean, we talk outside of work as well. So we maintain that personal connection. Yeah. If they've got something going on, they let me know. If I've got something going on, he lets me know, and we just go about our day, really. When things get really tough down there, this last week or so has been a little rough, we're able to just, put our heads down, we get together, we figure out a plan, and we get through it.
Yeah, I think that's such an important, aspect of that is just being able to have those conversations, because how many times has someone been through something and then we didn't even know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced that personally, but you try to put in people's shoes, and I can't imagine how that would feel. Like if I could just say, hey, how's your day going today? Or how have things been? I feel like we've all had those conversations. People are like, oh, just another beautiful day or just another day. Right. And it's something I say commonly, but it would be tough to not have those conversations and then something happen. And it's just so easy to say, how you feeling today? How you feeling these days? Everything all right?
Well, and I think being able to recognize signs and being able to make yourself available and open and aware, and letting others know that you're aware, is so important. We're coworkers and we spend more time with each other than we do with our loved ones at home.
That's true.
So, if I can be there for even one coworker who said, I'm really struggling at home, they may not have the support at home, or you spoke about isolation. They may be in a situation where they're isolated in a piece of equipment here all day. They go home, there's no one there. They're sitting there with their dog. They eat their dinner. They get up and do the same thing the next day, day in and day out. And maybe they don't have that support system. So if we can recognize when we see signs, people, it could be a personality change or it could be a physical change, and just being willing to step up and say something is so important.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Can we talk about some of the signs and your experiences and these conversations? Is there anything specific that some of our listeners that you would think about that they can keep an eye out and say, wow, that's actually like my neighbor or my coworker right now, and maybe I should have a conversation. So what are some of those specific things that they should be looking out for?
Well, Heather let off with it. It could be something as physical changes, something simple as physical changes, or a behavioral change. Maybe they're showing up late to work, or maybe they're not picking their mail up every day that they're used to if we're talking about neighbors. Maybe just how they interact with you individually at work might be a signal. And sometimes just asking, hey, are you okay, is really enough to have them come back to you and be like, listen, no, there's something wrong. I'm not okay right now. And the biggest thing you can do for them is just to listen. They're not looking necessarily for someone to solve their problems, but someone to listen to them.
Physical cues, verbal cues are really, really important, especially if it's someone that you interact with on a regular basis. How they speak, the tone in which they speak, if it's more aggressive than just, if they're slumped, if they look physically tired, or so there's a lot of those cues that you just got to be aware of. I may work with someone every single day, see them every single day. If you do, you will see it. You'll see it. There's cues.
There's 1,200 members in Peckham, at any given day, and we don't see them every day like you're suggesting, but there are still those things where just have that conversation. Just say, hey, this, I know I've only seen you in the last month, but, you're acting a little different today. Is everything all right? That may open the door to something that is going on, is bothering them. And you may be that first step into them, changing that aspect of their lives.
Yeah, I received a phone call from my manager the other day. I think it was 2 days ago. And typically I answer the phone, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And I answer the phone. I was like, what's going on today? And he goes, are you okay? He goes, you don't sound yourself. I said, I'm pretty tired. I said, it's been a long week.
Yeah.
So, he's able to pick up on those clues as well, that just by the way I answered the phone, that I was off.
Right.
Which is good. Which is what you want, right? You want your folks to be asking those questions.
Yeah, for sure. So Heather, I want to get back to, your personal experience and story here. You've had a pretty traumatic, event in your life, and do you mind going into that a little bit and explaining, from start to finish, how you came out glowing from that, but how it affected you overall in your life?
Sure. 2015, my husband and I were celebrating his 40th birthday. We had to do it over the course of a few days because we couldn't get everyone together at the same time. So it was a lot of celebration and dinners and a lot of fun over those 3 days. And my husband woke up that last morning and was complaining about his neck hurting, and he's like, I slept wrong. We've been partying for a couple of days, so I think I think that's all it is.
Yeah, hitting 40 is not fun.
That's right. So that Sunday morning, we woke up having been up pretty late, and I heard him getting sick, and I said, that's odd. He doesn't get sick. So it brought me up out of bed enough to know that, okay, there's something wrong. And I heard a crash, and he collapsed. I recognized right away that there was an emergency, ran in, and he was unconscious on the floor and making, aspirated breaths. So I ran, grabbed my phone, threw the phone on the floor, called 911, and immediately, checking for breathing and all of that. He did stop breathing. So I started CPR while I was on the phone with 911 and proceeded to do CPR for 9 repetitions of CPR before the ambulance arrived. They took him by ambulance to our local hospital. In the meantime, of course, police show up, and I've got a dog barking in the background. My dog was freaking out, and my in-laws were driving by to go to church and happened to see the ambulance in the driveway, so they came in. So it was a lot. There were a lot of us there in my kitchen at the time, and ambulance is trying to take him out, and I'm trying to make phone calls, and got to the hospital, and they continued to work on him for another 40 minutes, but unfortunately he didn't survive. And during that whole experience, I had been CPR certified for 24 years at that, or 20 years at that point. I was a lifeguard in high school. So I had the training, and not for 1 second did I ever think that I wouldn't be able to save him. Knowing the statistics, but I came out of that, and that same day, I can speak a lot about the managers and the companies and the family values we have here. One of our executive team, Peter Semino, was on my doorstep that afternoon. It was a Sunday. So he drove over an hour to be at my home, just to show his support and be there. From there, I struggled for a good 6, 8, 10 months, and my work was starting to slip. And my manager happened to notice, hey, you know, we know you've been through some stuff, but what can we do to help you? And from there, he made a recommendation that I speak to somebody other than family. And I did. And I went and got myself some help. And it took a good solid 2 or 3 years to get through that and be able to just sleep normally and start to live a relatively normal life again. And since then, all I want to do is like reach out to people and say, I've been to the lowest low, and you can get out of it. You can heal.
Wow. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Justin, now I know you've had a different experience, as such a young age and involving your father. Do you mind kind of going through the same storyline and, from start to end and how you are today?
Yeah. So like I said, I was 15 at the time. I had gone to my grandparents' house, and I don't think I was there for maybe an hour when my mom called, and I could hear her screaming on the phone. So we loaded up in the car and went to my house, and on the way there, my grandfather was like, "Do you know what's going on?" And I said, and I don't know why I said it. I said either, and my dad was not a violent person, but I said either he hit my mom or he's dead. Turns out that he had shot himself that day. And so dealing with that at a young age, again, at that time, this was something that wasn't spoken about. It just wasn't. So I had to kind of go through that alone. Therapy at the time didn't really help, even though we tried. So about the time that I was 18, I had transitioned from one therapist to another because the first one didn't really help. So when I started seeing the second one, he changed my mindset about the whole situation from what I was convinced initially of, that was your dad that did that, or excuse me, that wasn't your dad, because that's what I was told in therapy, to the new therapist who said, no, that absolutely was your dad, and he made that decision. So as I got older, I started struggling again. And a lot of it was anger. But I didn't recognize it so much as abnormal because it felt normal. And then we tried a bunch of different medications that it just didn't seem to help. And finally, when I turned about 28, I was actually 27, almost 28, I had gone through a career change, and I was at my lowest point, like broke, no money. Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for gas to get to a job. And I cracked basically. And fortunately, I ended up with the police at my house. I ended up with the ambulance at my house. Like, it was a mess. So I started seeing a new physician, and she went from, well, this really isn't just depression or PTSD from what you've seen and what you've been through in your earlier years. She said, this is more bipolar. So she was able to get me on a good regimen of medications, and that was just about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago to the day.
Wow.
So I've been stable since then, and it's wonderful. I'm actually able to live a normal life, and
that's great.
So,
yeah. And I think, during your story, you made up a good point. You had a therapist, wasn't working out, didn't work for you, and you didn't give up. And I think that's what a lot of people overlook, is that they say, well, I tried therapy, it didn't work. When in reality, your therapist makes a difference. Who you're talking to makes a difference. So, I would encourage anybody that's having that same struggle to experiment and try somebody else that might be different, and like it worked out for you. So great. Thank you for bringing that up, and thanks for sharing that.
And not everybody needs medication.
Right.
But if it's somebody that does need a medication, there's many, many different keys that are going to fit the lock. Mm-hmm. So the first one you try may not work.
Right.
Or the fifth one. But they'll eventually find the right one.
So going back to, your personal story, Justin, is, if you could go back in time, talk to your father, what steps would you suggest that he takes to kind of get that help? And then we'll get into a little bit about what we provide here at Peckham overall.
So unfortunately, I was too young to recognize at that point, because I was only 15.
Right.
Now, as I've grown and spent time with thousands of people through working on the ambulance, and seeing people in different levels of crisis, I can look back now and see those signs. They were all there. Being withdrawn, he struggled with some paranoia, which at the time I'm like, I don't know if this is normal or not. So if I could go back now knowing what I know, I definitely would have tried to help much more than what I did, because I just did not know any better at that point.
I was kind of the opposite in my position, is that there were no signs. There were no physical signs of any kind, that there was a major health crisis about to happen. Yeah. And the interactions when you live with someone, day in, day out for years, you don't necessarily recognize it physically because it happens slowly over time. Right. So it was a very sudden and traumatic experience that it took me years of outside help and family and having to go through the process before I could even talk about it. And now that I'm able to talk about my story and see how it has impacted others and how they have taken that information and said, oh, well, the what if, I have children at home and I want to make sure that I'm prepared to help them if I need to.
So let's get into a little bit about, what we offer internally to our members for if they ever need help or they were looking for some support. Where would they go to find that?
So I would say reach out to your supervisor, reach out to HR. We put it right on our member portals. Some of the resources that we have, but we have an internal EAP system that we have set up for everyone through ESI, and it offers a lot of resources. It's there's counseling and free counseling at that, and it is internally for our members and their household. That they can utilize there, but there's other resources. If they're looking for services, childcare, which is extremely hard to find now, special services for disabled children, even medical care and help, right. And I found that legal services. So it's been a really great resource. We do post for of course 988 hotline, and New York has a Hope Lives hotline as well. Right, so. Right.
Yeah, I think the EAP is a great program, the employee assistance program that we use through ESI. And I feel like it's underutilized. A lot of people just think it's for counseling, but it's not. It's not. All these life stressors, legal stuff, financial things. There's a lot of tools on that. And I would implore everybody to just go and look and take a deeper dive into that and see what's available to you. Because again, it's free. It's free. So it's a great service. Yeah.
I agree with that.
I
actually just reached out to Heather not that long ago for the EAP number. So it's there and it's helpful.
Yeah. And I think, Heather, you've encouraged us as managers just to call it, just to get familiar with it. So that if you have to deal with an employee, at least you kind of know a little bit what you're talking about. Yeah. So I threw some coins on the table from AGC with the 988 as a reminder, some challenge coins. And there's a lot of things out there. And again, I think AGC has really stepped up their game, trying to help the industry. On the YEMSHA side, I know they have things posted for the mining industry. There's things out there. You just if you need help, you need to turn to somebody. And again, hopefully, as managers, we're asking the right questions. We're seeing those triggers. We're identifying those things too. So
really, just got to keep the conversation going, is what it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We talk about, efficiency as one of our values, and we don't realize how much stress can affect that.
Absolutely.
At an individual level. So, keeping your finger on the pulse, so to speak, like you do at Hoosick, Justin, and like you've done in the past, right now, even currently with your team now, that's a whole nother level, right? So keeping that finger on the pulse is important, even if it's just a mild check-in.
So guys, just to kind of, close out a little bit, if you were to have some personal advice, for our own internal members at Peckham, Justin, what would it be?
It might be scary at first, and it might feel unsettling to talk about it, but it's going to help you in the long run. When you can let go of what's really going on inside of you, inside your head, it'll settle you down. It'll reduce your stress. It's really important to just have that conversation about it.
There are resources out there for everyone. and it can be a conversation with a coworker or your manager. It can be those outside resources. If you're a very private or more withdrawn person, you have those outside resources. I can't state that enough. There are resources and help out there for everyone.
Well, James, Heather, Justin, thanks for being with us. I think this is, we try to, there's a lot of different months and weeks that get recognized throughout the year. In my mind, this is one of the more important ones, and I think you're so proud to be part of a company that allows us to have this conversation and recognize it and do the things we do. So thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
At Peckham Industries, safety isn't something we talk about when it's convenient. It's who we are and how we show up every day, every shift. Safety is a core value, just like integrity, dedication, and efficiency. So here's our challenge to you. Let your passion for safety lead the way, every shift, every task, every day. Thanks for tuning in to the Peckham Pulse. Stay safe, stay passionate, and be proud knowing that we're building America's infrastructure.